Testing, testing, testing. Let me see before I do this so that I know where to get this in editing. Clap, clap. Hello. Welcome back. If you don't already know who I am, my name's Taylor Waits. I am a fourth year doctoral student, now doctoral candidate, um, in the English program in critical and cultural studies at the University of Pittsburgh. And as a black woman in academia, black queer woman in academia, it's important for me to make videos like this to demystify the process of getting a PhD, especially for people of color, black people, black women, black non men who are considering going at least into academia for the moment to acquire the degree. I say that because I do not plan on going into academia. My goal with receiving this PhD is I would like to start my own school for Black girls. I am impassioned by the curriculum and instruction, the ways that we teach, and what we teach, and talking about how racist the things that we teach and the foundations on which we build teaching are, and finding new ways to get to audiences of folks, specifically students who have been left on the margins when it comes to education. So that's what I'm here to talk about. That's what my channel is really about. And especially videos that are centered around my own experience in academia. But I wanted to come and just talk briefly about what the compositional exam experience really is so that I can, like I said, demystify the situation. And because I didn't really hear a lot about it until I got to this point, it's something that I feel like on TV shows. I was just telling my friend, because as you are in the English department, a lot of people write, and we write a lot of other things. We're all artists. And I'm writing a show about the graduate school experience because there's not a lot of good shows that encapsulate grad students, not undergrad students, not students in high school or secondary school, but graduate students, and like what we have to go through, and our struggles and how they really relate to what can be talked about in terms of student activism, as well as like people who have causes and who are unrightfully having their labor distributed in these really exploitative ways. So it's really important for me to talk about these things. I want to start off by reading verbatim what the compositional exams comprise of according to my program. Because, yes, I do have a binder full of all my school things. And it tells me, in this binder, I have the paperwork they gave me, like, at orientation. Excuse me. And I do, like, check it off because it makes me feel like I'm moving in this process. It's a very long process. Some people have been in my program for close to 8 or 10 years. Other people, really wrap it up in year 5 or stay for year 6 or 7. So this process really is up to you. For me, and for context, I am trying to not necessarily speed through the program, but I want to graduate in 5 years exactly. I know a lot of people who would recommend that I take the year 6 so that I have like an extra year to find a job. And while I would enjoy that, obviously being a student is not free. I still have to give my labor in order to be a student. Specifically, you have to either teach or work somewhere else. So unless you have a really cushy 6th year fellowship, you're back on the beat of things. You're not really getting free time to do what you need to do. You're getting paid the same amount of money that you got paid before. So I'm trying to get out. I told my chair, which I'll explain is going to change, but I explained to my project committee chair that I want to be here for 5 years and not a minute extra. 5 years flat, not an extra hour I'm giving this institution. Once I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. So the project examinations, it says the general guidelines. The PhD project examinations fulfill the university requirement for a comprehensive examination prior to initiating dissertation work. One of the more important functions of the project is to provide students with an occasion to generate questions that will guide their research, the answers to which will likely surprise them. It talks more about like what the project is supposed to be doing, while the project exam involves an historical and theoretical exploration of the project, right? On a particular problem or an interrelated, set of issues. It involves an historical and theoretical exploration defined by a set of questions or problems and investigation that will build a strong intellectual base for more detailed work at the dissertation stage and will draw on material that could be useful for research and teaching beyond the dissertation. A way of making connections among various interests a student has explored through seminar papers and other work from a broad range of courses taken. So that's verbatim what the guidelines are for project examinations. Then it talks about the committee, which, if you don't already know, a project committee is three or more people from your department looking over your work, helping guide you through the work. And then you have one outside reader. They could be from a different institution or they could be from the same institution, just a different department. And then the exam comprises of three main portions, which are the project proposal and bibliography, the project papers, and the written and oral components of the project examination. So then it goes into detail as to what the project proposal, the bibliography, the committee, and the papers should look like. And it even goes into the specificity of like page numbers. For my project proposal and bibliography, that's a good way. I'm now leaning into like what is actually going to happen, such what it is. And in order for that, you need background to understand how the exams work into the dissertation, right? So in a PhD program, you know, this is also what I've been told by my chair, right? In the PhD program, you have coursework, which I did for the first 2 years. Some people's coursework leans into 3 years, depending on like if you get certificates on the way, if you want a master's on the way. You can kind of customize it to what you want. Or if you just want to take extra classes, you can take classes the entire time you're here, which is kind of like why people go to a PhD program so they can just learn and learn and learn and learn in a certain amount of time, right? So you have your coursework and then you have assignments in coursework that you have to pass. You have to pass coursework. And a lot of people will say like it's not hazing, but when people give you anything like a B and lower, they're basically trying to fail you out and make you question whether or not you want to be here. So then your chair will talk to you after coursework and they'll tell you what your professors think of you. At the end of mine, I had a pretty traumatic meeting. He ended up telling me that three out of my five out of my 5 courses from just that semester, my professors thought I wasn't prepared. They thought that my writing was rudimentary, and 2 of them said verbatim, "I don't think she belongs in this program." I remember him giving me a lot of really good advice. Number one being that if anybody in the program says something like that, like "I don't think she should be here" or "I don't believe in what she's doing," get as far as fuck away from those people as possible, because the academy itself is a cult. It doesn't really matter who's here, and we shouldn't have to qualify ourselves by like how much we can, talk eloquently or have really good grammar. That's not what tells somebody is an expert on something versus somebody who's not an expert on something. And even when you talk about expertise, that word and that wording and the way that we look at expertise is so white and so washed of any of the things that I do, of any things that I want to talk about, that even bringing that up is so wild. And get it here. Those people were all black. So kinfolk ain't always skinfolk ain't always kinfolk people. So I had a lot of like energy from, the black people in my department, not all of them, but some of them who were very like trying to push me to be this, oracle sort of person. Sometimes you get into a PhD program and people are like, you can do more, you can push yourself, you can be better. And I'm like, what if I want to give the bare minimum to a white institution that doesn't even deserve to have me here in the first fucking place? And knowing if we're doing it based on our peers, because that's how you get a job, you're judged based off of what people are doing in your field. That's what the whole fucking point of doing all this shit is you find out what's going on in your field. If we're doing just comparisons as to what I'm doing in the department based on the other white people here, they're not doing as interesting work as I'm doing. They're not doing as much work as I'm doing. Why is it that the black person always has to come out of nowhere, put their Captain Save-A-Ho cape on, do this elaborate project? No. When I got here, a girl was doing a project on pigeons and, like their significance in the world and like what messages people really get about pigeons, which I feel like for a like small town news story is really cute, but then like to have an entire PhD centered around it, it's crazy to me that I then do work about student activism and y'all don't understand why the fuck I'm here. So that was really traumatic and terrible. So basically, all I got out of coursework is people want me to act like them. Got it. And I was vehemently not going to do that. I'm one of the students when I'm in class, if I'm not intrigued by what's being said, I'm not going to give energy. I don't really speak back when I'm in class because I already feel like it's not fair to have one or two black people in the room talking about race and like expecting me to lead the class when you're a whole person with a PhD and you should know how to lead your own class at this point. Um, so yeah, I just didn't have a good time. So finding the members of my committee was ups and downs because I have these people that are within my committee who are pushing me to do things I don't want to do, or who are wanting me to go in directions that I don't want to go. Because like I said, they just all want little mini means. They just want other people who want to go to the academy. And since I'm so vehement about the fact that I don't even believe in this institution as a whole, I'm only doing this because as a black woman, I have to do something to put me on a level playing field with everybody else, especially in the work that I want to do. Otherwise, in education, I'd be working, at a public school for like 15, 20 years, putting in time and energy to prove to people that I deserve to be there. And Z-Way just had a really good point about like how black people just spend so much time. Racism takes up so much of your time. It was a quote from, I'm forgetting the elder, but they've all kind of said it in summation in black feminism and black womanism that racism takes so much of your fucking time. I'm not going to spend a PhD that I took my time and energy out of explaining to some bitch that I need to do more of what they want me to do. That's not why the fuck I'm here. I don't have to shuck and jive for y'all. I'm going to present to you what is interesting to me. And you can, just like in any other academic work, when you watch a movie, you can say, this movie wasn't interesting to me. I did not like this movie and I'm not going to see it again. You can give it a 2 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes. Give my paper a 2 out of 10. You can't fail me for it. I didn't say anything racist or homophobic or xenophobic or wild. Some of these people in my department are literally referencing Nazis in their work. But y'all don't think I deserve to be here? So I had that first portion. Then I had to find a committee, a project committee, and that's been really difficult because, like I said, I do work that is not necessarily centered around race, but because I'm talking about activism and student activists, obviously a lot of marginalized people are at the middle of a lot of these protests. A lot of these have to do with race because race comes into play, especially publicly and especially on campuses all the time. So it's going to come up, and obviously I just explained to you my views. So it always seems like Taylor is the one who's talking about race when I'm like, this is something that everybody should really pay attention to, not necessarily people who are concerned with race. And when you're in a department that's majority white and white people who you already have to explain what the project is about, you have to sit there and hold their hand through why they have white guilt or why there's racism in a department, why it is that the black people in the department don't have the same experiences as they do. Once again, you're set back in time. I can't even really do my project because I'm too busy explaining to everybody why it is that I'm being typecasted as this black angry woman when they could just read a book. And they love Robin DiAngelo. Why don't white people read it and actually make action with it? Me to all white folks. So it was just so much time dealing with semantics and politics. So many really good black professors have left this program, fleeing practically for better resources, better pay, better treatment. The Pitt English department is just historically white, historically. And there's lots of graduate students that drop out because of the racism that they experience, because of the fact that they can't really find people that identify with them or that know their work very well. So I've basically created a project committee that are people that are like tangentially related to the work I do, which is what I've heard from my chair and from a lot of other people is very typical. Like, unless you go to a school that caters to what it is that you're going to, you're just going to have a bunch of people that either believe in you or don't and just want to like help you or don't. Some people are definitely in it, like when you start talking to them in terms of preparation about like, oh, I'm starting this committee, they like, I've had people be like, well, I want to make sure I get credit like for being on this committee. I want to make sure that people know I helped you. And steer clear of those people because they're just there for the clout. They're just like, especially if you're black and you're one of the few black people, they might just be pining to get a spot on your committee so that they can say, like, I worked with this black person. Can't you see? I have 2 black students, so I'm not a racist. So steer clear of those people. Then you've got people that aren't necessarily blatant about their intentions, but you can tell from after working with them for a few months or weeks, like whether or not they really give a fuck. I know some people whose chairs like don't ever respond to them, don't email them back, um, that don't really set up time to talk with them, but are very adamant that they're like the ones in charge. So I know people have had that experience. I know people have had really good chair experiences where they feel like they're talking pretty regularly, and the feedback that they're getting is really aligned with where they felt uncomfortable as a writer, and they feel really pushed. Like, I love that. And then you have other people that are sort of in my predicament where it's like, I found enough people that believe in me that this works. But because it's an entire 5 to 6 years, those people leave, those people change their mind. Um, and you have to like be on your toes so much that you're just kind of gonna end up with the people who have been in the department the longest, because those are the only people you can trust, right? So my committee is pretty big because I started with a lot of like really good people when I first got here, and they've all since left the department since I've been here. So they didn't last the entire 6 years, which happens a lot. There are people whose entire chairs leave the department, just like I said, because it's a dog eat dog world out here. Sometimes they find better opportunities, and good for them, because you should never stay someplace that you're not, getting what you need. So I'm not mad at those people. Those people definitely need to continue doing what they need to do. But a lot of those people obviously are people that like really aligned with the work I was doing. So I consistently feel like I get my heart broken at least once a semester or once every couple of months, because somebody else is coming to me being like, I'm not going to tell you the full story, but I'm definitely not going to be here much longer. And I'm like, okay, we just started like having really good conversation, but like do what you need to do. So I'm really happy with my committee as of right now. But as you will find out, um, after you do the examinations, you're allowed to like start over, and you can have a totally different committee because the people you've been working with have been like cool, but they still don't necessarily align with what you're doing, or maybe they all have since left, so you need all new people. There's a lot of circumstances as to why you would change it. And then you also have people like me who definitely want to keep like a majority of the people I have there, just because I do, like I said, there's nobody else. Um, and there's also like, I have had really good reports with these people, but I want to move some placements around, and I'll explain that. So in the in the exams, you have written exams and you have oral exams. Your written exams, according to what like my colleagues have told me, like traditionally and historically, written exams are something that is timed. You get 5 questions or 6 questions, and you only have to pick two, and you answer those 2 questions under the time limit. For us, it was three and a half hours. Yeah, 3.5 hours, basically an hour and a half per question, and then 15 minutes per question to like think of what you're going to say. I know before going into the exam that everybody on my committee told me that they're not going to not pass me. They were like, this is a traditional thing that happens, and I want you to know before we get into this process that this we're going to use this as an opportunity to have a conversation, and for you to use these as like papers that you can use to, do something with, versus wasting your time and like testing you. That's not why we're doing it. So I was really happy with that, because obviously the anxiety that people feel about whether or not they pass their exams, and sometimes people fail their exams because they're being hazed, or because people just really genuinely don't care. Um, and it really sucks. It genuinely, genuinely sucks, because nobody deserves to have to go through obstacles to not only do the things that they love, but to learn. Education should be free and accessible to everybody, regardless of their capabilities and abilities. Um, but not everybody feels that way. So they told me off jump, like, don't worry about that. But the written portion, this is what we're looking for. So they did give me expectations. If I'm going to be hailed technically as a PhD, as like an expert in this area, they're looking for a difference between like me and what sets me apart from all the other experts. I don't mind that as like an expectation, as long as you're not racist and if you're not anti-black, right? And if you're not sexist. So if you kind of agree with the patriarchal idea that women have to like strive more in order to reach the same levels as a man, or to reach the same level as a white man, hypothetically, the person that we're all trying to strive to be, then I don't want you on my committee, because then you're going to think that I need to have like a 40-page paper typed out, double spaced, about this one very like insular thing that's going to contribute in these very banal ways. But when you really put it in a comparison of like all the dissertations in the world, which is what I'm doing, I'm thinking of modes and models that'll make me stand out. I'm like, I don't want to write this. I want it to be something that lives, something that breathes, something that's available for free access, something that people can go back to, something that I can say I did that. Because what most people say about their project exams, and even my, professor sort of said the same thing, is like, you write these two papers, you never look at them again. People don't ever talk about their project exams ever again. They don't ever show them to people. It's something that you suffer through, you turn in, and then you never look back. But like I said, I don't want that. I don't want it to just be a one off sort of paper. I want it to live somewhere, and I want it to actually bring a lot of breadth to the actual project. Um, but the first paper, as it was explained to me by my chair, should be like what my arguments are, all of my arguments, and where they come from. So I believe these things about this project because X, Y, and Z. If we look at all of these things, we can see X, Y, and Z. And that paper was 26 pages. It says here, there are no page limits. Like, it doesn't say how long the paper needs to be. Um, so we just kind of went based off of what we felt was best. But it says 20 to 30 double space pages each. So I got in the sweet spot and did 25. Um, then paper two, same thing, 20 to 30 pages. And mine ended up being longer than paper one, but that's because I'm doing, like I said, different models. And one of those I had to write a script. So the script was pretty long, which I really enjoyed because, like I said, I'm not trying to write an argumentative paper 20 times. Like, that's what undergrad is. I don't want to do that. I want to do something that pushes the field. I want to do something that pushes me, and I want to do something that's actually challenging. So how about you give me something that's actually challenging? And that was, like, obviously a really hard task to basically, like, see into the future, and to plan out this project in a way that I feel like is realistic and that also will get me the results that I'm hoping for. And then the final portion is the written and the oral exam. So you turn in those two papers. Those two papers, realistically, I did the first one, I would say, in the span of like a month and a half. I finished my proposal and defended it in January. So I wanted to do my exam by October. But then my chair ended up being up for tenure and got really busy. So we ended up doing my exam in November. So I just passed my exams. Woo! Um, so I gave myself from February all the way till November to write these two papers, which is obviously a long ass amount of time. I ended up doing the majority of paper one in my first semester and ended up finishing that like in March and just having it in a really good place and in a place where me and my chair could like go back and forth about it. It's well before November. Paper two was definitely really rushed, like I said, because my chair had a lot going on, so I didn't really get to meet with him barely at all by the time the summer started and well into second semester. So, I feel like that was definitely more so him dropping the ball than me. I was ready, I was available, but as I said before, you can't control the people who are in your committee schedule. Like, if somebody gets pregnant, if they don't like the university anymore, if they have to leave for whatever reason, if they have to go on a fucking long ass trip, that all eats into your time too. And you can't just go switching people every couple of months because somebody's leaving again. It's like damn near impossible. So I decided to like stick it out, but I really would not recommend doing that again because the rush that was paper two caused a lot of miscommunication between me and my chair, basically to the point to we had to meet the week of my exam just to be on the same page as to like what this exam's about and where we're going after this. Obviously, I'm really happy that it's built in that I can move things around because even y'all know that people will tell you to your face like I'm free and I'm ready and I'm available to do this, but then you'll see in person that they're not actually available to do those things. And sometimes, like with any relationship, you've got to cut it off for your own good. For me, I only have 2 more years of this program, really a year and one semester. I got 3 semesters left, and I really don't need somebody wasting my time. Like, if you're just gonna sit there and come up with excuses, whether they're valid or not, that you don't have time for me, your student, then I'm gonna have to find somebody else. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And that was just a huge moment of contention because I'm like, my other people in the department or my other people in my committee have already told me, like, it really doesn't matter. This is a traditional thing. I've already read both of the papers. This is really just to help you further the project. Like, it's really not that big of a deal whether or not we have a conversation about this. I know from talking to my other colleagues that some of their people in their committee have never spoken to them ever. That some of these people just come to your project exam to say, oh, I like this idea, and they leave. That it's really your chair that decides and makes that decision as to whether or not you're going to pass. And if you don't have a chair or a committee like mine that already had the conversation beforehand, that unless I did something drastic, of course, then they're just going to pass me. Um, you might go into it being like, damn, I might not get out of these exams. And like I said, sometimes people are legitimately being hazed and bullied and harassed and are not making it through that moment. So it was just really stupid. Like I said, going up to it, I just want everyone to know that while you're in this PhD program, you should be surrounded by people who are excited to be around you. You should be surrounded by professors who make time for you, and you should be surrounded by people who would die to be on your committee. Like, because we don't have a PhD, they think we need to humble ourselves, but they should be humbled to be in our presence. It is just as much a nod on the chest or not a pat on the back for them, especially professionally, knowing that they've had all these students that people can say, like, that's how they make their money. They have students that will back them and say, like, you did a good job. So if bitches are not doing their job, do not pat them on the back for that and don't reward them for that. So for the first set of people that didn't work out because they weren't prioritizing me, because they were trying to get me to do things that I literally told them I don't want to do, they had to get cut, period. And obviously that's going to make political rifts in the department. You thought people didn't want me to be there now. Imagine now, now that I'm being asked so bold to, number one, record it and say what I'm feeling and having this be out for decades. Because, like I said, people need to know about the experiences that people of color have in their graduate schools so that before y'all apply, y'all know what the fuck is up. But also because we don't hold these people accountable ever. You're not the only place. One of the things I did say in my papers is the only place that graduate students can really like exert power is in our projects, because those live forever. People are now, I will say, most people are like, don't read my dissertation, or I was like really depressed when I wrote it, or I just did it to graduate. And I really want that to change about school in general. Like, I don't want people to dread school or to think it's just something that we have to do to pass. Like I said, I want to be challenged, and I want to challenge other people, and I want to be excited by what I'm learning by. Dare I say it? Dare I say it? So those are the two papers and sort of what that looks like. So it was like a 9-month process. Then you have to do a revised bibliography before. For your project papers, you turn in a bibliography, which everyone knows you're probably going to throw away. And I used a lot of those sources, but not the same ones. Then I did another bibliography that was like more so what I've been reading and what I've been sticking with since the project. And then you turn that in, and it gets put into a drive. At least in my department, it does, so that everybody can see it, like future iterations of people. And then you have your written and orals. So my written, like I said, was 3.5 hours. I already broke down the sides of them, and I got, for my first day, I got 4 questions, and my second day, I got 6 questions. So all of the questions, it's so funny because you can tell which person on your committee wrote which questions. Back at it again. And I was talking about my writtens. The first one was day 1, spent 3.5 hours, and I turned it in. I finished, thank you. I finished with them, I would say, in about 2 hours flat. I had like answered the question to what I felt like was fully answering it. So then I was like, well, let me use this hour and a half to get at least 2 pages per question. And I was able to do that on the first day. I really like those questions. And like I said, I could easily sense like the animosity. And I was just like, I'm not going to answer those questions. So then the next ones on the next day, I felt the same thing where I was like, I can clearly see like his influence here. And I can see where the other people in my committee were sort of like, just imagine this. And I'm like, thank you. Because I didn't feel like doing all this explaining. I want to imagine. So I answered the other 2 questions the other day. Those ones took me a little bit longer. Or the first day I was in bed and I was watching YouTube. The second day I was on my couch where I am now, and I was watching the new brunch show on HBO Max. It was so good. I was definitely getting distracted. But by the second day, which they give you a day in between, I was like, I don't feel like doing this anymore. Like, this is just so dumb. The fact that I even have to type up my little questions to prove to my little people after doing hours and years of work. Ugh, just stupid. So yeah, those were my written. Then the orals. My orals was an exact week after my last written. I had my writtens on Wednesday and Friday, and then I had my orals on the next Friday. And orals is, they call you in. Mine was on Zoom because two of my committee members don't live where I live, so everything was on Zoom. Um, they call you in, and basically you talk about the questions you didn't answer and the answers that you gave. Everybody asked me one question and just let me elaborate. Only one of the people in my committee like actually had a conversation, like went back and forth with me, and then my chair definitely like was looking for an argument. So don't go in thinking that like, okay, I've already answered the questions, like I've done what I needed. You still need to go over the questions again, and like why some people might ask, like, because they're butthurt, why didn't you pick my question? Not even necessarily why didn't you pick it, but like what steered you to pick the questions you did pick. I know other people have gotten asked questions like, um, well, if you skipped over this question, what answer would you have given? Like, what is the worst reading you've given? What would you give yourself? Like, really weird questions I feel like to be asking at this stage. If everybody on the committee isn't fully into you like doing this project, I would hope that it would have came up anytime before right now. And it's also not the time to like big dick, which is what I say, or like try and measure dicks right now. Like now is not the time. Just help me to pass this dumb, silly little traditional thing that everybody has to do. Not make it so nerve wracking, and let's just have a conversation. So I kind of enjoyed when they just let me sit on my, you know, um, pulpit. I don't know what it is. I don't go to church, but I like that they let me have my moment. Gay. They let me have my moment, and I was able to just like explain to my fullest ability what I felt about everything, and I could like sense the energy. Like I said, that it was most of these people don't feel like they need to be here doing this, or slash are tired, slash are like, okay, girl, like we get it, and then everybody else is just sort of like, I really want to quiz her, um, which was so, like weird energy, like I said, for grown people to have. Um, so yeah, so then that took it was from 2 to 4:30. So that took about 2 hours. Like I had spoken for so long, and I didn't even realize I was talking that long until I looked down, and my chair was like, "We only have 20 minutes left because Taylor has really like explained herself, and still find time to argue with me." Yikes! On the day of my exam. But yeah, we did that. We had our little back and forth. And then afterwards they deliberate and then they come back and they say congratulations. We talk about like a little bit about like life and how everybody's doing. And it was right before Thanksgiving break, so we're saying like, oh, everybody have a really good holiday. And then you get off the call. I called my gal pals who are in my program right afterwards, and we set a time to celebrate. Like we said, we're gonna do candles, we're gonna do like the whole thing, and go celebrate ourselves. And then that was it. I think for the past 4 years, like to have thought of this examination process as like one of the harder things to get through. I feel like everybody, especially the black people in my department, were like, don't really think too much about it. It's really not that big of a deal. As long as you have a really good committee, you really shouldn't be worried. And you would know that beforehand if they didn't like the work you were doing. We would hope that somebody would bring that up before.